Down. I just got back from grabbing a quick bite to eat, and I noticed that, God, you really like a lot of feminine sisters. I mean, a lot of sisters really stepping up
Mm,
in the last 3 or 4 months. Like,
mm,
like really spreading their wings. You're seeing a lot of it. We're getting a lot of them coming on the show. Um, but the one I just saw, which it had to be something you just put up recently, uh, they really kind of covered everything. You know what I mean? I mean, it talked about telepathy. It talked about moving through different dimensions and timelines. It talked about seeing things as they're arriving or before they come.
mm.
Um, you really covered a lot of everything. And I was thinking yesterday. I sent Morgan a note just in the middle of the day because last month October was just, I mean, by all measures of previous months since 2012, I mean, even if you combined them all, I don't know if they carried as much, as much pop as October did, but it really seemed to be on the other side of it. I guess after the full moon, it just seemed like, wow, this is a whole new world. And she had said that she felt like survival was being brought to the surface and all of its programs and sub programming. And I just had the thought yesterday. I was like, it just feels like judgment has lessened so much.
Mm,
And then last night, she put up a post a while ago, and a lot of people resonated with it. And she was talking about judgment. She was talking about the internal and the external things that are created or how it's rooted in that. I thought, I know it's weird. It's like, how is judgment tied to survival? But I don't know. We just seem to move into a whole new atmosphere, and that post you just put up just kind of had a great State of the Union kind of frequency to it. But welcome back. It's good to see you. It's been a couple of years. Uh, you're just saying you moved from Melbourne to the Gold Coast in Queensland,
Sunshine Coast.
Sunshine Coast. Yeah, Sunshine Coast. Don't ask me; I get them mixed up. But yeah, it's good to have you back.
Nice to be here.
And I know you want to talk about something in particular, and we can get into that. But I'm really because I don't really follow anyone. I do collect a lot of uh, memes and posts for the Soulogy group every day, and so that's how I come across your stuff. And you might notice. I mean, I don't really say a lot, but sometimes I will. I have on yours a couple of times. But was I correct in your regard? I mean, in the comment that I made, that there's a lot of sisters really spreading their wings and really letting it all hang out. I mean, I see it in Judith Kuzel. I see it in your work. I mean, did I miss something, or did you like hit the accelerator 3 or 4 months ago?
I certainly feel like it's spiraling forward. I definitely make a similar observation to you. There seem to be a number of people, women in particular, that seem to be, I guess you could say, reclaiming a certain kind of power by speaking their truth and sharing experiences they're having, often multisensual in nature or um, multisensory as well.
Right.
Um, Whereas in general, we don't tend to speak about these things, worried about possibly offending someone, confusing someone. But now I'm far more outspoken than I used to be.
I know, and it. You know what really has my curiosity piqued the most is because I guess we all knew this was coming.
Mm,
We all knew it was coming because we remember when she landed, shortly after 2012, the Divine Feminine's back, and then there's been this whole progression of her expansion, and then the good stress or good energy that was impressed upon the masculine energy, which then started to follow suit, and now we find ourselves on this new playground where we know more than ever that the energetic occurrence happens first. And I'm sitting here going, what's this going to look like when this energy starts to really physicalize even in the global stage. I mean, this mama bear, mother goddess, divine feminine energy uh, has just been coming on and coming on and coming on, and now it just seems like, the gates are wide open, and almost like an avalanche or a waterfall, or maybe more like a tsunami, right?
That's certainly an accurate way of describing it.
So, and how has 2021 been for you? I mean, it's obviously been full of fluctuations.
Mm.
Many people have concurred in regard to it doesn't take as long to take on energy and process it and get to the other side of it, but there certainly has been some. Maybe they don't last as long on the linear timeline, but they sure can bite you real good.
They certainly can. Well, I guess a lot of people, internationally outside of Australia hear a lot about Melbourne these days,
Mm.
because there have been a lot more lockdowns and a lot more of people starting to stand up. A few weeks ago, there were 30,000 people who apparently showed up for protests, and last weekend it was up to 100,000 in
I
front of the
know.
parliament. And so you really have people sort of standing up, and people will ask me, well, is it the same up in Queensland or in the state of New South Wales or other parts of the country? And we have not had the same situation as Melbourne, but I do sense that there is, how will I put it, a tidal wave that is
Yeah.
starting to flow through the country. There are different rules that are being laid down, but generally, I don't find that affects me so much. I'm aware of it because people mention it, but how I experience it is energetically, especially in my paintings. And when we last spoke a few years ago, I painted intermittently, but over the past year, I'm up to 750 paintings. So
Wow.
just to give you a sense of how things are accelerating for me, I see things geometrically. Everything for me is geometry. I have seen things that way since I was a child, but did not encounter many people who could relate. So generally, I kept that to myself. But more recently, I just find the way energy flows through me is like a cosmic symphony.
Hmm.
And I seem to allow that cosmic music to flow through into paintings.
I'll say 750. You're like the Soul Speaks 5D of artists. that's that's a lot of volume.
It is.
I'm
It
trying to
is.
slow it down a little bit now, and yeah, I don't know. Have you found, it sounds like it though, that as time has gone on and as your energy is coming out unimpeded, like so many of your sisters, that your creativity is expanding?
Yes, the painting is a very good example of that, but also how I am taking on energy. Some people might describe what I experience as something called synesthesia. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard the term. I don't know what it means in this moment. Can you explain that?
Sure. Synesthesia is one of these clinical terms that was used to or is used to describe people who have a mixing of the senses. So musicians, in particular, are often described as synesthetic if they will hear things in a different way. Like when they're playing music, they will see certain notes in certain colors.
Mm.
So every A they hear will be purple, or every C they hear will be yellow. And for me, I find that it's a mixing of all of my senses. But most importantly, I guess, I'd say that I see sound and I hear color. So when I paint, I'm not just using coincidence to choose colors for what I'm doing.
Yeah,
The colors I'm hearing. So it's
you're
singing out to me.
composing. You're composing a song.
Exactly, and I guess for me, part of what I get so excited about is for a very long time, I did not know how to translate what I was experiencing, and so all of a sudden, it is like a song that, is impatiently waiting for me to translate it.
Wow. So when did that change for you? Was that in 2020, 2021? Was it?
2020, I would say when we started having lockdowns in Australia,
Okay.
For some reason, I went from painting intermittently to daily, and then it was a couple of times a day at times. And what began as two-dimensional pictures of shapes generally ended up becoming more multidimensional, um, became sacred geometry, and then different, how will I put it, frequencies of light language in symbols
Yeah.
would come as well.
Yeah, I just saw one of those. It was very interesting. There was 4 figures in the middle and 9 around it. I think you tagged me on a comment or something, and it had the light language out in the field on the left, and it was very interesting. The yellow was very prominent.
Mhm.
Uh, when you're getting this, like for me, I look at that, I have to go back and look at it and just kind of stare at it. I don't normally know what I'm getting, but I know I'm getting something, right?
Mm,
And of course, there's more and more of this happening, especially like with sound therapy,
mm,
sound healing, and of course, the relationship between the geometry, the colors, and the sounds, which at the Soulogy Fest, Eric Rankin talked about sonic geometry.
mhm,
J.J. Hurtak and Desiree Hurtak, they talked about the sound and the relationship between sound, geometry, and color. And there's this whole interwoven history in our
mm,
DNA. And you're starting to see more and more people express in what would have been very atypical 10 years ago. But when
mm.
you do a painting, are you getting a message while you're doing it? Or is it simply a channel of inspiration of what you're receiving as you're getting it?
It can be both, but often people will ask me questions like, "What does this one mean?" And I'm not always in position to translate it into English because it's vibrational. But
Right.
I do find more often I am singing light language, and I do feel that the messages are more universal. They're loving in nature. They're sort of guiding us toward wholeness or recognizing the wholeness within ourselves. And at times, people will ask me to do a painting for them, do commissions, and I will get a feeling of sensations or vibrations through a person, and I will interpret that using
Yeah.
painting.
See, to me, that is a really good description of how what I know best. Just I'm only speaking of myself, but it always seems to be by feel and by vibration, and I think this is part of the reason. And I can only speak for myself that I've had some difficulty transferring what I'm receiving into, you know what I mean? It's really strange, but what you're talking about is what I'm talking about and what I'm seeing this year, especially
Mm,
where it is more of a vibratory experience. Uh, and you're seeing a lot of these, like I said, would have been considered atypical, but you're seeing more and more just the light language, the artistic expressions of light language, all these different wild, what do you call them, glyphs that people put
mm,
together.
mhm,
There's just so many songs, poetry. I mean, of course, some of the traditional things, but it just seems to be coming more and more into our field. One of the things that has kind of been coming to light lately that I've noticed with people, with myself, is there just seems to be like a different way of communicating now. Like we're sending
mm.
and receiving. The old methods are breaking down. I've had people come on the show and say, "Are you finding that you can't talk to people?" And I'm like, "Yeah," in the middle of a show. Well, I mean, it's like everything has to be substance. I guess would be
Mm.
one way to describe it. Are you finding that?
Very much so. I feel like everything is a stepping stone to returning to our innate capacity to be telepathic. And I feel like even phones that people are using, we have phone numbers to call people. And really, if we tune into the vibration of someone, we know who's calling before they call.
Yeah.
And when it comes to my paintings and the vibrations that I'm translating onto paper, part of what gets me so excited is I've been looking for that analogy of how to convey what I'm experiencing in a way that other people can appreciate it and at least get it on some level. And I've long related to composers, but that would be the analogy I would use right now. When a composer has a divine inspiration or download, and they can translate that music
Right.
into notes, and it can be played by instruments that many people can hear and appreciate, then they feel a sense of euphoria because they're able to share what they're hearing or experiencing in a way that other people can share and experience it. Maybe not exactly the same way, but at least it is a way to present it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there's
Mhm.
all these changes in in really every aspect of our life, these things that were second nature, how we
Mm,
talk to people, how we respond when we feel the gut feeling or the intuition comes in, the telepathy, the lucid dreams. I think you
mm,
mentioned something about deja vus aren't what they are anymore in that post that I was
mm,
reading. Uh, and then as this whole journey of the empath, like, to put it in human terms, like when 2012 broke, there was many empath groups and empath support groups, and people started to
mm,
understand they weren't the only one. And it
mm,
seems like it's come full circle. And one of the ways that I've noticed this with people, with myself, Morgan, and so on, is that a lot of what we're feeling now is clearly collective. Not that we
mm,
don't have some stake in it on a personal level, because we know the universe isn't going to let us off the hook in any way. But
mm.
it just seems like it you know, it feels very distinctly collective, or at least a big piece of it.
Definitely, I would relate to that, and when it comes to something like, creative expression, light language in particular, all of a sudden, you have people coming out of the woodwork who are, channels for this kind of
Mhm.
information, and people will understand one another. You'll show up at a venue like I've done, and I'll have people come up to me and start talking to me in a language I didn't know I know.
That's wild.
It is wild.
Yeah, I watched that happen at a bar and grill in Sedona 2, 3 years ago, and
Mm.
literally my friend uh, and this guy that was 20 feet away, and there was 30 people out there. They started singing light language to each other. Never met each other, and then it ended up being a whole big deal. Uh,
Yeah.
One was doing light language in opera, and the other one was doing it kind of in a jazz scat kind of thing. And it's like you just can't make this stuff up. But
No, not at all. It's sort of funny, you can imagine, 3 people playing clarinets or clarinet players showing up somewhere and recognizing they all play it. How often do they just start jamming? You
right.
don't necessarily see that.
So, and another thing I think that people have talked about, I know we have on this show, and I think you might be able to relate to this and just maybe could share a little bit of your experience, because 2020 and 2021 have absolutely been a fast track. There's no question. COVID was an
Mm,
incredible, perfect, genius creation to catalyze that. But I call it the Forrest Gump bubble, like where regardless of what's going on,
mm,
that the individual or individuals are creating a wider and wider sphere of their energy. It's almost like a
mm,
bubble that's impervious and impenetrable,
mm,
because it takes so much more effort now to go play in, let's just call it the low vibration, or the
mm.
distraction or the distortion. Are you experiencing that since you moved to Queensland? Are you,
Oh, very much so. I
yeah.
can give you the example of, my children because I unschool. We left the school system at the beginning of this year. And schooling is a very interesting example because there are a lot of people that fight against the system, are in conflict with teachers, principals, just the way things are done. And there is a group of people who've decided, well, rather than channel their energy into conflict like that, they will step outside of that and create something new.
Mm,
And the energy and community and connection that comes out of that is quite remarkable.
wow. So you're going through all of this with kids in the house?
I have a
You
7-year-old and an 11-year-old, yes.
Oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me.
Mm,
Now, I know you must be familiar with Mary Rodwell, and
mhm,
we've had some others on here that have, that have fallen in line with the work she's been doing for so long with these kids in particular. We've had I think we had a 9-year-old on not too long ago. We had a 18-year-old that was just mind blowing. That had a whole story with her mother. I mean, uh, I can't imagine being uh, in your situation with your head in the game and serving and participating because I see the work you put out, and then having these two young souls in the house. What's that like? Are you picking up anything from them? Are they
Well,
bringing?
different energies, certainly. I
Yeah.
can give you a couple of examples.
Mm.
Some are quite humorous. Um, my son is very much into technology, but the way he uses games like Minecraft, he focuses on things like teleportation and immortality and themes that really resonate with what I do. Although he'll look at the paintings and say, "Yeah, sure, mom." But he's actually working with a similar theme. And I've taken him to some talks that I go to with a group of, I guess, spiritually awakened individuals. And all of a sudden, he will become a spiritual artist and he will draw or sketch pictures and say, "Before we leave, mom, I've got to show this picture to that person." It's quite remarkable what we all have the capacity to do when put in the right setting, given the freedom to do things. And with my daughter, she is also very much into to art and singing, and she started to blossom in those areas since leaving traditional school.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean,
Mm,
it's almost like I guess it may be like this, where basically we just stop functioning as we have, and this stuff just comes through wherever we go
mm,
and whoever we come into contact with. Like this, it's extraordinary. So he's in that frequency, and at
mm,
some level, you would say he's unconscious of it, but is he
mm,
really? Because we're thinking
mm,
unconscious is one thing and conscious is another. But here's this kid who is in that atmosphere, and he picks up on it, and he remembers, and he creates something. Then he knows who to give it to.
mm.
Like that's pure higher self.
It's quite remarkable, and also just the way he develops, what I would describe as sort of a photographic memory. We all have an amazing ability to retain information, but generally, we're taught in conditioned society, we have a terrible memory, right?
Mm,
And if you get into the right zone or do the thing that really you have a passion for, all of a sudden, you tap into this, unlimitedness, and when it comes to his coding, for example, he's not really interested in reading regular books, but he can memorize books of codes. It's amazing. He has a photographic memory for that kind of thing. Just like we all have sort of a draw to certain things over others. And
mm.
when given the freedom to focus on our passions, when we give ourselves that freedom, then it's amazing how the world and reality around us unfolds differently.
Yeah, yeah. And so I bet that's another byproduct of this. The whole COVID quarantine and all that. First, they were
Mm,
taken out of the schools, and people were
mm,
taken off of their 8 to 5 or whatever the time frame was. And then you have this, like you said, this new way or a different way or an alternative way, a creative way, and where they can kind of be their own steward, I guess. Are you seeing, do you get to interact much with other parents that are doing this type of thing?
I do. I'm part of some co-ops and sort of groups that meet regularly, and it's amazing to see children excelling in
Mm,
different areas, often in areas that were not. The kids weren't free to explore those areas within the school system, but it's also the idea of giving a child the freedom to do something when they're engaged in it, and not tell them, "Okay, it's time to stop and do something else." Let them finish what they're doing, connect with them, commune with them, see what they're actually involved in, rather than attempting to cut off the flow
right.
of divine inspiration, whatever's flowing through them.
Yeah. And to understand them and to understand they're not all the same. You're
Mm,
saying that, and I think back to when I was a kid and I could not eat greens. Now I juice greens every day, but I mean, but it's the same pattern because I remember because I come from a pretty big family and I was the only one that wouldn't eat the
mm,
greens. So I would literally sit there and eat everything, and then I'd have to sit at the table until I just wore them out, and they just finally let me get up from the table. But it was the pressure where you're not going to pass unless you eat the greens too, right? So
Yeah.
I developed this aversion. But then as I
Mm,
got older and I started to experience things on my own terms, it's
mm,
become something I really enjoy, you know.
mm,
But I can see that where that would work with a kid. Like, why, how many kids have been held back because they were held back because they couldn't relate or connect, or it just wasn't their time to do math or to do this or to do that, and they might be excelling as a with their grammar and their literature and their
mm.
writing. So I could totally see that. That's a great. So any like revelations or shared epiphanies with these other parents that are doing this? Are they talking
Well,
about uh
they are talking about these kinds of things. I find that initially I was drawn to programs like Steiner and Montessori because my understanding of what they were like was more alternative. They focused more on creative expression, music, civilizations, in a different way than the mainstream schools. But over time, many systems start to integrate mainstream programs, and they don't necessarily turn out to be in practice what you might imagine in theory. And through becoming involved with the homeschooling, unschooling community, I find that I have many shared values with
hmm,
other parents, people who are interested in organic food, for example, permaculture, people who are not in favor of following the status quo just to follow the status quo. They
right.
do their own research, they're proactive, they're interested in what their children are learning. They don't simply drop them off somewhere and pick them up 8 hours later and
Yeah.
assume everything's fine.
Yeah. That's good to hear. And it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense too. Now, one of the other things that's changing um, is the communication with the body. Like
Oh,
the
yes.
body as a separate aspect, just like any other aspect of us, has really seemed to come online, and that probably has a lot to do with the presence that people have kind of been forced into around the world, that frequency of self introspection and so on. But one of the things that you wanted to talk about was the transition that we're going through to include a breatharian lifestyle.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I mean, this is the trajectory of what you had said. Uh, I can I hear people talking about their relationship with their body, which includes what they ingest, what they smoke, what they drink, what they do, or
Mhm.
don't do. And there seems to be uh, in that definitely a movement towards cleaner eating, cleaner
Yeah.
lifestyle, more aligned, and so on. But it doesn't seem to have the charge of like you've got to be vegan, or you've
Mm.
got to do this, or you've got to do urine therapy, you got to do that. Yeah, there's still different ways to get there, it seems like, and maybe they'll all converge to one way. Maybe that's what you're going to lead us into. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, and I wanted to hear what you had to say about what you had written me about. And I think I pretty much on target there with where you're going to go with this.
Yes, it's a vision of a kind of human evolution, if you
Mm,
will. I did a lot of breath work. Some people look at holotropic or cathartic breath work or rebirthing.
mhm,
Some of the listeners may have heard of those terms. And as you tune into your body, you start to open chakras, open senses, open parts of the body that might have been dormant. And over time, you do detoxes for that kind of process. And I found that I became far more lucid with less food. Historically, we can look at crises or catastrophes like World War I or World War II when people were starving and they seem to be far more conscious than they are at the moment. And if we look at Western countries, you have a lot of obesity, for example, and people eating processed foods where it disconnects them from themselves, from the earth. And I've come to know people who've gone through a progression from eating different kinds of foods, from eating heavier foods to
mm,
lighter foods. And they just have a different relationship to the earth because of how these foods are grown. And I guess in addition, I'd add that it has a lot to do with sunlight. And in my own journey, I grew up in Canada in a place that was quite cold
Or
and
you get
dark a lot of
around.
the year. And somehow I moved to Australia, which is the opposite side of the planet. And I've progressively moved from a colder part of this country to where the average temperature is much higher. The average reception of sun that I get on a daily basis is much more intense. And I would suggest that that is something that's happened in parallel with my changes in eating
Hmm.
and the way I process energy, because energy is sunlight. Sunlight is energy. And some of the foods we can ingest that have the most energy are things like seaweed and greens, which actually process energy and have a very pure form of energy.
Yeah, I started juicing middle of June,
Hmm.
and 75 vegetable, 25 fruit,
Hmm.
and it was, there's no question in my mind. I mean, people saw me. Somebody made a comment about it yesterday, but I came on every day, regardless of how I felt. But there was definitely a huge purging element to it. There
Mm.
was a physical purging. My whole face broke out, and I looked like was 13 years old, breaking out, early puberty. Uh, and it's still, and I'm still staying on it pretty good. Like I've had a day, like 3 days of where I've actually not juiced, and that's probably a first. But it was also my body. It was weird. My body said I need to go eat something. I need to
Yes.
eat. You know what I mean? It was like I needed to. I needed. Even last night, I bought a piece of fudge. I don't even eat. You know, and I'm like in the grocery store, just picking up a couple of things, and they had this freshly baked fudge. I'm like, my body said, get the fudge. I'm like, I don't even like fudge. I'm not that fond of, but I ate it and it was so good. But it was not just good in the way it tasted. That wasn't even the point. It was like my body was craving it. So there's, for me anyway, there's like this overall bend of the arc is juicing and water and coconut water
Hmm.
and less food. I can't eat
Mm.
like I used to, even if I try to
Mm.
eat. I could eat 3 times what I eat now,
Mm.
but 4, 5, 6, 800 ml, fresh organic juices a day, and it doesn't take long either to see these changes. I know you've
Mm.
been doing this a while. Where are you at with your diet now? And I know you're getting a lot of sunlight as well.
Well, I have ups and downs, sort of like you talk about with the fudge. Fudge isn't my thing, but I do sometimes have heavier food. I find if I'm on a raw diet for, like I was on that for a few years,
Hmm.
over time, my body could benefit from two stomachs, I think. Although we go through a process of evolution in what we eat, sometimes our body does say we need something else. And I know when I was pregnant, for example, I was vegetarian with my son, and I was vegan when I was pregnant with my daughter. But when I was pregnant with my daughter, I had a craving for feta cheese. So one day I had feta cheese. And even though that wasn't in my typical diet, my body wanted it. It's different when we talk about cravings when we're going through this journey, because I find that cravings can also be viewed as hidden needs for
Yeah,
things that you might be deficient in. So if someone has a craving for pastry, maybe they're deficient in magnesium, or if they
yeah.
have a craving for chocolate, maybe it's potassium or something else. So we're not necessarily seeing or feeling or tuning into viscerally what the body needs. Whereas as you are even detoxing regularly, if you have one day where you fast and you eat heavier foods, you're still more lucid and tuned in to what your body needs, and you can do a juice detox. You don't have to become vegan or necessarily a breatharian. That is certainly a path some people are taking,
Hmm.
but it's more about tuning into your body and what you're putting into it, and listening. I find
Yeah.
an interesting example for me is I hear food similar to how I hear music and I paint. I'll go to buy food, and each item will have a frequency or a vibration, and I'm drawn to certain things. And I've progressively moved in the direction of where most of my food comes from. which I find is quite strategic.
Wow.
Hmm.
Wow. I can relate to that a little bit. Yeah. There's certain, like, when I started doing it, I just threw everything in, and then over time, I almost have like a formula.
Mhm.
And it's weird because my body, like, I don't know how to say this. It's almost like a drug.
Mm.
I get excited when I'm doing it. My kundalini flows as I'm
Yes.
preparing it. It's trippy. And then the energetics that come from it are very noticeably different.
Mm.
Even with the energies as they come and they go and they come. And I've had some, around this full moon, I've been like a lot of people where, how am I ever going to get anything done? I can't focus long enough to do anything. I
Mm.
come over here, I do a show, and I roll to the couch and lay there going and staring at the ceiling. It's just like, wow, is this going to change? But I guess this is all part of the transition. Do you
Mm.
think we'll get to strictly a breatharian kind of existence?
Well, it's possible if that's on one's path. I
Yeah,
don't feel it's everyone's path, much like I don't feel every carnivore is meant to become a vegan.
yeah,
I have grown up in a culture, for example, where pork and sauerkraut were a staple, and I haven't eaten that in a very long time, but it's just been the course of my evolution that has led me to eat what I eat now. And
yeah,
so it's something that's open to everyone, much like all timelines are open to everyone. And if it feels right and you're tuning into your body, then it's definitely something that I find increases clarity, lucidity, energy, and really accelerates multidimensional existence.
yeah. And then there's a part of me that in general, for everything, not just this subject, that there's something bigger than us that's
Mm,
kind of creating this anyway. Like, I know that because I had went to Sedona for Soulogy Fest, and I took the juicer and I said, I'm going to start juicing. Morgan just went
mhm,
back to Australia. I'll just start, focusing on this. I didn't do very good over there. And then when I got back, I just hit it. And as I went through it and the communication, the clarity was there, I started to understand that this was perfectly orchestrated, just like your painting. I was
mhm.
being prepared for the onslaught of energy and purging that was going to be coming. And I'm thankful that happened, because otherwise I'd probably be in the hospital right now.
Well, I suppose when some people hear, that you had juice for a meal and they're
Mm.
expecting something a little more, extravagant, let's say, they might be a bit surprised. But you do what feels right. And I find when it comes to juicing, for example, the cleaning of the juicer is just not fun for me anyway,
No,
and
no,
it's a
it's
big deterrent for a lot of people.
yeah. Well, it's something you got to do as soon as you do it. I think I only did not do it twice, but yeah, it is. It is, and like, and I have. It's been 3 days. I'll juice tonight, and then I'll start back tomorrow. But yeah, I think too. Like, I don't know. It was a spiritual. There was a spiritual aspect to the experience.
Mm,
So this would have gone from middle of June. Really, it's still going on, but let's just say for 4 months, and 90% of what I took in was this organic juice,
mm,
which was high in greens. And it was like, for instance, one of the things I noticed, because obviously you're not taking in as much solidity or
mm.
calories. So I'd be laying on the couch, and it'd be 10 o'clock at night, and I would get up off the couch and walk to the kitchen and open the refrigerator, and I would think to myself, "What are you doing?" Like,
Mm,
it was the first time I noticed that eating, because it obviously has different things that it offers or takes or whatever you want to call it, but almost like an addiction, like boredom.
certainly,
Yeah, I
very
was
much
starting to
so.
notice my boredom. I would go look for something to eat, or whatever the case was, and so that began a new level of communication and understanding and awareness, and it
Mm,
helped me with removing judgment,
mhm,
self judgment. It helped me with being able to go, okay, I don't need to do that. I'll go make some herbal tea and put some carbonated water in it. I found that's a great drink,
Mhm.
and get back on the couch and do what I was doing. But yeah, there's definitely a relationship, like what you were saying at the top of the show, how much it enhances your clarity, and everything else that goes with it.
Mm. Yes, you do tend to see differently. I know with, some of my paintings, I refer to those because at one stage I was working at a health retreat. I was teaching meditation, doing some breath work, and I would bring my paintings in and show some of the clients. And some of them were former drug addicts. And a few of them would say, "Gee, when I was on heroin, I used to see stuff like that." Or, "Gee, when I was doing coke, I saw that stuff quite often."
Hmm.
And I would say to them, "Well, I see this stuff all the time, and I don't generally take either of those 2 things." Actually, I don't take them. But anyway, it sort of planted a seed of confusion in the minds of these people because, what they were there to work through and take drugs to deal with, was something I wasn't taking drugs for, and yet I was enjoying what I was doing.
Right.
So, it's kind of interesting how we can reframe, how we see the world, how we behave, how we eat, why we're eating, but it requires a level of distancing, from what we're doing,
Yeah.
that level of, observer, and if you do a detox, like the juicing you're talking about, you do tend to hear certain inner voices more clearly, like, "Why are you doing that? Why am I going to the fridge? Or do I
Mm,
really need that?" Whereas typically you're either tuning out on purpose or unconsciously, and you don't know what you're doing.
yeah. And see, I've been able to remove all butter. I don't have any
Mhm,
butter in the house. Think of cheese. Yeah, but if I do eat some cheese, that's when I'll go out and get a sandwich or I'll get
mhm,
something that has cheese on it. But I won't. There's like eggs. I Eggs is my favorite food of all time. I
mhm,
could eat eggs all day, every day, and it wasn't like a under the thumb kind of. It wasn't a judgmental thing. It was just something my body came in and said, "That's enough.
mhm,
No eggs in the house is the rule." Right?
mhm,
I can go to the diner once every 10 days and have some eggs with toast and whatever.
mhm,
But yeah, and I'm okay with it. And that's another thing I'm
mm.
finding too is it's not like eat your peas or don't eat this or don't smoke that. It's just like it's just a natural progression, like a natural evolution. These things are just falling away. Yeah.
They do, and I find one of the most noticeable changes is the change in your palate. Like, if you give up sugar, for example, all of a sudden, the things that appeal to you are very different. You might go for a green juice or a green smoothie instead of something that was full of sugar previously. And when your lucidity strengthens, then you might start to see yourself on different timelines, eating different things, and
Mm,
sort of noticing different behaviors that you associate with the different intakes of foods.
yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I have to concur. Uh, First of all, when I first made the juice, um, I thought I was going to have to like play with it like I'm making a soup. But I quickly figured out the taste. It was all like we were talking about earlier, like it was just vibration and feeling and knowing.
Mhm,
And and so now I can go in there and I know it's this many carrots, this much broccoli, this boom, 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 apples, blueberries, strawberry, boom. And it's absolutely delicious. Now, I would have never thought that would have been a delicious taste. By the same
mm.
token, if I go to eat something that I used to love, I take one bite and I'm like, ugh, I can't I can't do that
Can't eat it
anymore.
anymore.
Yeah,
Mm,
I can't do it anymore.
mm. Yes, I feel that's a natural course of things also. It's sort of like you have your own mechanism inside yourself that's supposed to tell you when you're full. And there are certain foods which people find very difficult to stop eating. You know, if you have, one spoonful of ice cream, some people can't stop till they finish the container. Or a chocolate bar, not 1 or 2 squares, but after 500 grams, they're done because the
Mm,
bar is gone. But I find over time as you change your eating habits, you have this natural sense of fullness in your body from eating less. And part of that is because the food is alive and you're tuned into that aliveness. You feel more alive. And so you read the messages, the signals that your body's giving you more clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm totally and then the other thing too. Now, I don't know how much of this has to do with diet or the expansion or the uh, the bringing on of more aspects of myself or frequencies or however you want to put it. But there's got to be a connection to some degree, to a significant degree, with the diet and with relinquishing certain things that I used to do. And what I'm talking about is the effect on the body. Now, I
Mhm.
feel like some of this has to do with the, the shared sacred sexuality vibration that, say, Morgan and I have, um, and other things. But there's something that's happening chemistry wise to my body that, I really have no other way to say this, even though my hair is falling out and turning white and so on, uh, that I'm regenerating, that I'm getting younger.
Mhm.
Like I should be breaking down more. It's cold today. It's going to be 30 degrees and my lower back stiff and it's irritating me, but it's not like it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Mhm.
There's so many, similar to the way the energies come in and we're able to process them quicker. It's the same type of pattern, but it's in
Mm.
my physical body. I don't know if that makes sense to you or if you've seen anything like that going on.
Certainly, everything is interconnected, and as you become more lucid, you see more of those connections. And when it comes to naturally what your inclinations are, things you want to do, things you want to let go of or give up, they naturally go hand in hand with changes in other areas of your life. So, as your consciousness expands, you might feel compelled to change your diet. You might feel compelled to give up some sort of pastime or hobby you've had. In my life, in the recent past, I've had a lot of shifts going on. I've moved a lot, but recently I've sold a house. I have a caravan arriving next week. I'm going to be changing completely my setting. And I also notice around me, there is a lot of movement. So it's quite common. Even on my street, there are people who have either sold their houses or renting it and off in a bus somewhere, or they're moving, changing jobs. But of course, at the same time, you also see people who prefer to do what they can to maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
So they make those choices because they resist or fear change.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who are embracing it. And that is reflected not only in one area of their lives, but it carries over to affect all areas.
Well, there's a lot of people moving. There's a
Mm,
lot of movement and more every day. I've got two friends that live in Southern California. They're probably 70,
mhm,
65 or 70. They're partners. They've been together 10 years. They're they're from Europe. And I talked to them a couple of nights ago and they just got the download that they were to sell all their stuff, put it in storage, and wait for further instructions as to when or where you'll be going, but you'll be gone by Christmas. I
At least they have
mean,
a general idea.
but can you imagine? It'd be different if it was two 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds. But these are two, you know what I mean? And they're so aligned with their own personal guidance and their personal connection, which I'm sure is expanded by leaps and bounds since I saw them 2 years ago. But that's just like ballsy. I mean, like, whoa. Like you
Well, I
don't
don't
have
think
any.
age has anything to do with it though, Todd. I think,
Yeah, I agree.
tuning in, you can be a child, or you can be someone who appears to be much older, but really we're all in the same moment, aren't we? And time is an illusion.
Yeah,
So it's how tuned in we are to that inner guidance and how closely we listen to it that determines our journey.
yeah, yeah. And so I remember from talking to you last time, and again, it's mostly the energy. I don't remember the specifics, but I know you've been plugged in for quite some time. And
Mm.
because you were pretty active when I met you in 2018. I mean, you were putting stuff out. Although I feel like you've really ramped it up recently. like so many, like we were talking about. But God, what's it like to be sitting here now? Uh, just past this 11/11, 2021. We're about to go into 2022. All these 1 and 2 dates, power dates, and I mean, just eclipse coming next month. We just had an eclipse. We got
Mm,
the solstice. I mean, the the speed, I mean, unarguable acceleration of timelines and the expanse of information and code coming in. I mean, do you ever just stand back and go, wow, I knew this was coming, but I had no idea? Or are you pretty much over the wow and have a pretty good beat on where you're going to be at, where we're going to be at, where this is all going?
I just am very excited in this moment. I
Mm,
guess when I started putting stuff out there, I was sort of in the coaching mode and self-development mode, and I saw things from more of a left brain perspective,
mhm.
and I see things more from an integrated point of view now. And I'm not in any rush
Yeah,
to get anywhere because I feel it's all already happened. It's sort of like we're all in the process of catching up with another more expanded or advanced version of ourselves that's watching the choices we're making and seeing what's going on around us.
yeah,
I do feel that uh, we have a choice at how we look at things. And I tend to see everything in a positive light, although I recognize the dark. And for
right.
me, for a long time, I didn't recognize the dark. I wanted to put it under the carpet. But my life has changed exponentially because I not only expect or accept the darkness, but I integrate it and I see it as part of the whole.
That's right. Yeah, and I think that's been probably the biggest difference. Uh, if you look at in general, collectively, like since we connected in 2018, like there was still a lot of that fluffy love and
Mm,
light. Don't look over there. and, and then the Cali energy came in
mm,
and just started cleaning house. But yeah,
mm,
you're starting to see that. And going back to what we were talking about, Morgan was talking about survival coming up last month, or at least coming up for the first time, and people really being able to let go of it.
mm,
Uh, but in the judgment thing coming with it, well, that speaks to. I mean,
mm,
you're gonna have less judgment the more accepting you are
mm,
of all aspects of the universe. I mean, I did wasn't a bad trigger, but I got a little trigger yesterday, and almost immediately I was into laughter.
mm.
I saw something or I was told something, and I said a quick "fo" and whatever, and then I went and I just started laughing. I thought, oh my God, this is me I'm talking to, and it's just like you said. I was observing myself 6 months ago or a year ago, watching how I was damning myself by damning this person.
Mm,
And then here I was, literally 2 or 3 minutes into the trigger, laughing, going, "Oh my God, I can see his path. I can see where he came from. I can see why he's doing this."
mm,
And then you're just like, "Oh, well, this is great." It does take a little getting used to that. There's no shoe dropping.
mm,
That whole part of whatever that was is gone. It's really
mm.
strange. You really gotta look for it to find the BS now.
Well, I guess it depends on where you are. I mean, there are always different levels of consciousness
Yeah,
existing, and
true.
so there are people certainly who are still wrapped up in what they don't want to see and what they don't want to
That's
feel.
true.
However, there are increasing numbers of people who are questioning, and that I find quite exciting because if it's an example of a parent who decides they want to take their kids at a regular school, or someone who decides they may not get the vax because a friend of theirs had some bad reactions to it, or someone doesn't agree with the political system because of what's going on, those are all aha moments. And
Mhm.
when we have a domino effect of aha moments, that's when we have the kind of result we had in Melbourne, for example, last weekend, where
Yeah,
100,000 people
that
were
was
protesting.
crazy.
Mm,
That was crazy to go from 30,000 people to 100,000. I
in a
saw
week.
I know.
Mm,
And there was like 10,000 the week before. So it's it and I'm sitting there telling Morgan, "What's gonna happen?" I mean, you're going to have what, 150, 200, 300. If it
Mm,
tripled the previous times, well, how do you know it's not going to triple again? Of course, and then of course, all the people that don't show up or can't go that are in alignment with that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's happening. It's exciting. I mean, I don't think anybody knows exactly what this is going to look like. I mean, we could all wake up laying on the beach drinking margaritas tomorrow, and in the non-linear world, 8 billion people side by side, and we know every one of them personally and their whole life story.
mm.
Who knows?
Well, there are so many options, and I love how everything is really inviting us to live moment to moment,
Yeah,
to savor everything as feeling fresh and new. And in Queensland, here where I live, for example, there is this announcement that's been made by the government that certain things will come into force on the 17th of December. So a lot of people around me are sort of saying, well, what do you think of the 17th of December? And what's going to happen between now and then and after then and all of that? And I simply smile and invite them to focus on where they are right now.
that's right.
Because if you look at the example of Melbourne and other parts of the world where you've had huge uprisings, I feel that we as humanity have the power to change things any moment. And whenever you're
Absolutely.
given an idea of something that could happen in the future, that isn't necessarily the timeline that we're going to experience.
No, no, you're right. You're right. And you know that saying, and if we look at our own lives, especially if we look at our lives in terms of reawakening or remembering,
Mm,
it's always darkest before the dawn. And this universe has a great way of promoting humor and laughter, and nothing
mm.
better than as a parent watching a kid take something too seriously before you let them off the hook and tell them, it's not that big a deal. Chill out.
That's right.
Yeah,
Laughing more is healthy.
absolutely, it is. That's why comedians live to be over 100. Now we're all live to be into our several hundreds. I'm thinking 800 years. I see no reason to think small now. Every day, like you said, is the more present you become, and so many people have been, you know, in isolation,
Mhm,
alone, in privacy, and it doesn't take a long time, especially if the collective energy is supporting that or even encouraging that.
mm.
But you see, uh, everything gets expanded, and so with that, your dreams can become more realistic or can become more achievable, and the impossible becomes possible. So I just feel like, hey, what's there to lose? The worst thing that can happen is I can die trying, as they say.
Well, you cannot run away from yourself forever, as the saying goes. I remember years ago when I did radio shows, I interviewed an individual who claimed to be immortal.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting because it certainly prompted many listeners to question their sense of longevity, lifespan, and what is or isn't possible. And I feel that what's going on now is an invitation to question everything that
Yeah,
we've come to view as a boundary or a limitation and step outside of that, knowing that we are unlimited beings, that we can do anything and we already are. We simply have to allow ourselves to see it.
that's right. We're drinking the same Kool-Aid. And all you got to do is look at the
Good stuff.
placebo, right? Yeah, all you got to do is look at the placebo effect, or the placebo frequency template. I
Mm,
mean, it's the proof's in the pudding. I mean, it's 2021 and medical science still can't come up with any rhyme or reason to that. I mean, it's the same thing. What I believe, and is what I will, is what I can conceive, believe, and achieve. I mean, it's all related. And I find I have found too, although it's been something that I'm sure we all do, because so many of us are crazy when we talk to ourselves. But there's been more conscious programming. I would have to put it this way: I've been more consistent, consciously programming myself, and it's been, uh, I guess, the believability factor, the
mm,
conviction factor, has never been higher. No
mm,
matter what I'm saying to myself, and I'm also becoming very conscious of what I'm saying, like the self-deprecating uh, words, or just the different things that are pointing to this unconscious programming of
Mm,
ourselves that's now being corrected as well. It's just a wild ride, but it's all good.
certainly is.
Yeah, it really is. So, what are you getting into now? I know you're homeschooling. Um, I know you're active out there, and I really do appreciate your expressions. I really do. They're substantial. I mean, there's a lot of substance in the words, but there's also a lot of frequency coming out of the images that you use. And I love the way that you use images in the comments, as your comment. I mean, I find that very effective. And I love how just in the normal course of the day, you have those synchronicities. So I see
Mm.
this image at the right time and I read this post at the right time. And it's just, uh, it's a nice contribution that you're making and very unique. So I just want to say thank you for that. But are you getting into anything new or anything like that, or what's on your short term diary? Because that's the only one we have now, right?
Well, since going on the road in the caravan is part of the plan, there will be a new blog. There will be a way of me uploading all of these paintings so that people can have easier access to them in
Hmm.
different forms, also the patterns. And there'll be some new services, including light activations and paintings to go with those on my website.
So, okay, let's look at this real quick while we have you here before we get out of here. Let me just find Chrome tab. Okay, here we go. Let's look at this. Now, this one is the one I saw today. Will
Yes,
you?
that's the phoenix.
Yeah. And I'm looking at this thing going, what the hell is this thing telling me? I mean, I can see it, I can feel it. Uh, and there's so many things like this I run across where I'll look at them and I can't name all the people that do it, but and I'm like just looking at it going, what the heck? There's definitely something coming at you.
Mm.
Now, this one here, is this something that you did? This one here?
No, that one I did not.
Okay, okay. Because I was wondering what they look like. Would they be on your page? Would you have them on your page?
Which the
Your paintings or
The paintings, I haven't got them linked to my page yet. They're on the
okay.
Facebook page as you scroll through.
Oh, they are.
So the majority of them are there, but I have to put them in one place,
So you have
and
some
I haven't
wild stuff.
uploaded them to one place yet.
Okay, I got you.
Mhm.
See, these are all now these are ones you gather. Here's one. Now what
That
is
one I
this?
painted, yes.
So there's one, two, three, four, five, six. Six in the middle. Tetrahedron in the middle. Or kind of. Star tetrahedron. What is this one here? This orange one. Looks like a
It sort of reminds you of an atom, the orbitals of an atom
yeah,
going
yeah, yeah.
around.
I got you. Yeah.
For me, when I paint like this, it's interesting to note that I actually see things multidimensionally, and every aspect of the painting is actually in motion and moving. So this is like if you ever did biology, how you have a splice underneath a microscope of a cell, and you look at something. That's sort of the idea of what the paintings represent.
Wow. Well, I look forward to seeing more of that. What about the octahedron? I've heard a lot of
Mhm.
people talking about the octahedron more and more as time's gone on. I saw Matthias De Stefano was talking about it in his series on Gaia. I mean, it just seems like it's coming out of the woodwork now. You see sacred geometry. Is there anything coming into your knowing or your experience involving the octahedron in the new grid?
Well, I guess everything I get is vibrational. And
Hmm.
with the new grid, I do feel that it is in place, but that we haven't caught up vibrationally in order to experience it fully.
Yeah.
And there are definitely octahedrons that are part of it. But part of my move to Queensland related to a dream I had. I get a lot of information through dreams, including the names of my children while I was still pregnant.
Wow.
But I could see the grid, the way it was set up in Queensland, and how I was meant to go to certain places and interact with the energy to help facilitate things.
Did you go to the Gimpy Pyramid?
I have been to that area, yes. I'm surprised you've heard about it.
Well, Morgan's there. See,
Ah,
she's same thing happened to us in March. It's like she's got to go to the back to Australia, and the humans had to come into alignment with it, and it wasn't the most pleasant thing all the time, but we knew there was multi purposes, and we were just
Mm,
talking about the other day. She's about to leave Gimpy. She's been there probably a couple of months, and maybe 3 months. But yeah, we do a session, and there'd be 6 pyramids, and I'd see her and 5 other sisters standing in front of a pyramid, and they turn into octahedrons, and she's downloading octahedrons, and it,
mhm,
you know the Gimpy pyramid. I watched a video of it a couple days ago where they were showing all this Egyptian coins, Egyptian hieroglyphics,
mm.
here on the other side of the world. And yeah, there's something definitely going on um, in Australia. There's no doubt. It's almost like it's ground zero.
Well, it's pyramids all over the world are portals, and what we're doing is reactivating a lot of the portals that are part of this global grid. And so when we're drawn to different places,
Yeah.
the energy work that we're called to do is part of what's activating the system for collective consciousness.
Um, yeah, I absolutely agree. Do you okay, I would imagine that you are pretty busy in what we call dream state. A lot of people have made that comment.
Mm.
Um, do you think that we'll start to remember more of our dream state when we're not asleep, but as a human, we're in dream state? Do you think we'll start to carry that information with us and know what we're doing after hours, so to speak?
Well, I sense this is happening already for a lot
Yeah,
of people, but I also sense the context of the information is changing because I've done dream analysis, and there is a period where a person will look at their dreams in terms of linear time
right.
and look at past events and the relevance to what they perceive to be the present. But what you can also come to realize is when everything is happening now, there's a part of you that's doing things simultaneously, and you're sort of tuning into that vibration. And
Yeah.
you can actively bilocate and multilocate, and that's becoming more conscious for more people. If I understand you correctly, I think that's what
Yes.
you're referring to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had those experiences.
Mm.
The light bodies, we had one last week that was quite extraordinary. I'm still trying to integrate it, but yeah, it was like the light bodies were active, and we could feel everything, even though the humans hadn't consciously set it up or even knew that either one was going through it. But as soon as the contact was made, I'm like, hey, guess what I've been doing? And then it's like, oh, I know you've been doing it because this is what I've been feeling. So there's definitely something to that. And it feels like, too, that these things that are coming online, they're not just coming on like, I remember going back into the early shows, people would be talking about 2035 or 2050 or 2076 or not in our lifetime. And I'm like,
Mm.
no, I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
This is like
Uh-uh.
warp speed. I mean, seriously, we could be physically teleporting the vast majority of the world within months.
Well,
Nothing's
we
out of
already
the
are really. It's an
yeah.
interesting analogy to look at the film Avatar, which
Mm,
came out years ago now, and I understand there are sequels being produced. But why I bring that up is because the protagonist, Jake, was this military officer, and it's not a spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen it. But in his physical body, he's put into this contraption, and he goes to sleep in one body, and his consciousness awakens in another.
yeah,
And essentially, our consciousness, our stream of consciousness is moving all of the time. And it's not just even night and day is an illusion. And that's one of the illusions as that starts to fall away. Then you're more aware of what you're doing in other places, in other bodies, on
yeah.
other timelines. It's limitless, really.
I'm just wondering if we're going to get to a point where we don't sleep because the sleep is all over the place. I mean,
We didn't always sleep. It wasn't
yeah,
something our body always did or our being.
yeah. I'm having a conversation last night with me, the you, me, we, and it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get more than 3 hours sleep. This was 2 nights ago. Uh, but I
Mm.
kind of like programmed myself tapped into morphic field, tapped into the attributes of sleep, serotonin, dopamine, whatever, and just tried to align with it. And I actually had a pretty good day until later in the day, when it caught up with me. But yeah, my whole thing is that I was not buying into that I had to sleep 8 hours. Why have I
Mm.
gone through this change these last few months? Why is it that I can't sleep more than an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I wake up like I'm supposed to get up, and I realize it's whatever time in the morning I've got to go back to bed. I mean, and I've seen other people talking about it. So maybe that's going to be, well, wouldn't that be great to be up 24 hours a day? I'd love that.
Well, it is a reality for some people, but they're not living an ego-driven life. And when people who will push themselves living on adrenaline to sleep very little
Hmm.
because they want to be higher, create higher productivity, then it's very different from your state of being when you require less sleep and you're doing other things.
True. Yeah. Like adepts. Yeah.
Hmm.
All right. Liara, it's good seeing you. We have to get together again sometime after the first of the year if you're up for it.
Hmm.
Best of luck to you. Best of everything to you. You know, getting out there on a house on wheels and everything else that you're doing. Um, yeah, just best to you and your family. And thank you for showing up, and thank you for coming on the show and honoring us with your presence.
Thank you, and thanks to all of your viewers, listeners, and if anyone has any questions, you can find me on Facebook, and I'll see what I can do.
That sounds good. That sounds good. You take care.
You too. Thanks
Bye.
for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 20 minutes with Ben Parver. Yeah, that's who it is. Bye bye, Liara. Thank you.
See you.